I never imagined I'd return to the spot, my shaky hands brushing the corroded lock on the barrier that had tormented my sleep for 3 decades. The breeze murmured amid the lofty meadow blades, stirring recollections I'd labored to suppress over many years. Simply capture images for the property advertisement, complete the paperwork soon, and it'll be finished, Michael had advised, his words infused with that recognizable gentleness, the sort that handled me as though I were delicate porcelain on the verge of breaking. It was the identical approach others had taken since James passed 6 months prior. Yet they failed to comprehend. Not a single one of my trio of offspring grasped how this location affected me. How could they possibly? They had been so small during the tragedy. When Benjamin, my eldest child, my precious son, I still couldn't finish the idea, not even now. The proposal from the extraction firm exceeds reasonableness. Mother, $20 million. Imagine the opportunities that provides. Jennifer had urged only the previous day, her attorney spouse agreeing with a nod at her side. Father would have wished this for our family. But would he have? Over our 30 years wed after departing the spot, James referenced the farm so seldom that at times I questioned if he'd purged it from his thoughts as fully as I'd strive to. Aside from those journeys 3 times each year, precise as a clock. Angling expeditions, health seminars, meetings with former pals, assorted reasons, consistently followed by that odd hush when he came back. I pressed on the barrier, anticipating opposition from 30 years of neglect, but it glided open without effort. The weathered links and lock served merely as ornament. My pulse accelerated. The earthen path before me lacked the overgrowth it ought to have shown. It appeared tended, freshly leveled with recent wheel marks. Anyone around? I shouted, my words seeming faint beneath the immense Montana heavens. Is anybody present? Silence greeted me, but while traversing the half-mile trail to our former residence, I spotted further inconsistencies. The barriers had been mended. A fresh turbine rotated slowly atop the rise. Far off, structures appeared, modern ones, beyond just our aged dwelling. I nearly retreated at that point, contacted Michael or David. But an impulse drew me onward. Maybe James's words echoing in my mind, what he invariably stated when fear gripped me. The sole path forward is straight ahead, Ellie dear. As I reached the last elevation, I halted abruptly. Spread below wasn't the deserted ruin of a farm I'd anticipated, but a vibrant settlement. The initial dwelling appeared newly coated. Next to it, 12 modest lodges arranged in a half-moon. A spacious outbuilding shone crimson under the late-day rays. A conservatory reflected the glow, and individuals. People filled the area. Several males fixed a machinery vehicle. Youngsters frolicked in an enclosed play zone. A person draped clothing on lines. And equines, no fewer than 20, foraged in an enclosure that hadn't previously existed. I must have uttered a noise since a female glanced upward, in her middle years with mixed gray strands pulled into a simple tail. She shaded her gaze from the glare. Upon spotting me, she stiffened briefly, then swiftly addressed a youth nearby, who dashed to the primary structure. I remained frozen as she neared. Who is this female on my territory? What did all this signify? Had James transferred the land secretly? Mrs. Mitchell, the female inquired as she drew close. She recognized my identity. Eleanor Mitchell. Yes, I replied faintly. Who might you be? What is happening here? She paused at a polite interval, her gaze compassionate yet watchful, examining my features. I'm Margaret Santos. Folks here know me as Maggie. I've been anticipating your arrival. Anticipating. I don't follow. This farm has sat empty for 3 decades. A mournful grin crossed her face. No, Mrs. Mitchell. This farm hasn't been vacant for even 1 day since your departure. My legs grew unsteady. I extended an arm to brace against a post. That's not possible. We relocated to Denver following Benjamin, following the mishap. James, never. Your spouse returned the following month, she responded tenderly. And each month thereafter for 30 years until his cardiac issue overcame him. Reality spun askew. James, my own James, had visited here every month, not merely thrice yearly, but a dozen times or more. All those angling ventures, symposia, Getaways with university acquaintances. You're fabricating this, I murmured, though an inner voice acknowledged the veracity in her statement. I wish that were true, for your benefit. I realize this is overwhelming. She motioned to the dwelling. Care to step indoors? There's an individual particularly eager to encounter you. As if summoned, a male with Down syndrome emerged hastily from the central structure, around 35, with James's angling cap tilted unevenly on his crown. His expression brightened upon seeing me. "Ben's mother," he exclaimed, gesturing vigorously. "Ben's mother has arrived." The nickname struck like a strike. No one had used that for my child except James. Others always said his complete name. Benjamin. Thomas. "Sweetheart, recall our discussion," Maggie stated softly. "This is Mrs. Mitchell." "Mrs. Mitchell," he echoed obediently, advancing with his palm outstretched formally. "I'm Thomas. I assist with the equines and the plants." I clasped his palm instinctively, my thoughts swirling. "Pleased to meet you, Thomas. Would you care to view Ben's unique spot?" he inquired guilelessly. "I place new blooms there each Tuesday. Mr. James mentioned blooms cheer Ben in paradise." I struggled for air. Ben's unique spot. Blooms. I gazed at Maggie, wordlessly imploring clarification. "James constructed a tribute," she murmured. Beside the pond where my 10-year-old boy had vanished under the waves as I assembled his celebration meal, oblivious until too late. The sight that had ruined me. "I can't," I breathed, retreating. "I must depart." But Thomas grasped my palm in his comforting one. "No need to fear, Mrs. Mitchell. The pond is kind these days. It instructs kids to float so they avoid ascending to paradise prematurely like Ben." Before I could absorb his statement, a motor sounded. A dark vehicle neared, stirring dust. Michael had trailed me nonetheless. "Mother," he shouted, exiting. "What on earth is occurring? Who are these folks?" As Maggie faced my oldest living child, her demeanor shifted faintly. "Your dad's inheritance," she stated plainly. "And you have to be Michael. He mentioned you frequently." My child's expression hardened while surveying the surroundings. This area was meant to be deserted. "Who authorized your presence?" Thomas shifted partly behind me, abruptly anxious. "Your dad did," Maggie answered, her tone resolute. "Over the last 30 years. "That's not feasible," Michael retorted, positioning himself defensively between me and this unfamiliar person asserting knowledge of my spouse. "My father never referenced any of this." "Because he vowed to your mom he wouldn't," Maggie responded with a serenity that amplified the impact of her words. "He upheld 2 vows throughout his existence. To never abandon those requiring aid and to never wound Eleanor with recollections of this location." I rediscovered my speech, though it echoed remote to me. "You mentioned you've awaited me. How did you know I'd appear?" Maggie's gaze grew tender. "James was certain you would. In time, once he departed." She drew a set of keys from her garment. "He provided directives. There are items he desired you to witness. When prepared." Michael advanced. "We're not engaging in some enigmatic pursuit. This land is for sale. These individuals require immediate removal." I observed multiple folks afar pivoting toward us, worry evident even from distance. A female drew her youngster nearer. "Michael, kindly," I stated, discovering unforeseen firmness. "Let's at minimum comprehend the situation." "The situation is unauthorized occupation." "Mother, we ought to summon the authorities." Thomas, still somewhat concealed behind me, interjected. "Mr. James stated we could remain eternally." He assured. Michael's features contorted. "My dad has been deceased for half a year, and he didn't possess this spot solely. My mom shares ownership." "Indeed," Maggie interposed, her manner now professional. "That's why we've anticipated." James foresaw this moment. A youthful female neared, balancing a young child on her side, bearing a soldierly stance, fatigued gaze. "All good, Maggie?" "Yes, Jessie." Maggie reassured her. "This is Mrs. Mitchell and her offspring. They're merely touring." Jessie eased marginally, yet her gaze stayed alert. "Should I inform the rest?" "Not presently. Let's allow Mrs. Mitchell a moment first." I examined the young female. Scarcely beyond adolescence, truly. 22, maybe? The youngster on her side shared her eyes. "You reside here?" I questioned her straight. She affirmed with a nod. "For 2 years now, since Rick?" She gulped visibly. "My spouse in Afghanistan." The Veterans Affairs wasn't. Her statement faded, but her intent was evident. Michael's mouth tightened. But even he appeared to realize that commanding a soldier's widow off the grounds wouldn't reflect well, even inwardly. "Mother, we ought to converse alone," he stated curtly. Indeed, Maggie concurred. "Mrs. Mitchell, maybe you'd like to view the dwelling." "Your dwelling?" "My dwelling?" "The farmstead where I'd enjoyed 10 joyful years prior to that awful day, where I'd welcomed all my infants from the medical center, where I'd observed Benjamin's initial strides on the broad entry veranda." "I'll accompany you," Michael declared. In fact, I astonished myself by responding, "I'd prefer a short while solo with Maggie." His brows elevated. "Mother, we're unfamiliar with these folks." "I think we are," I countered, an odd tranquility enveloping me. "They're individuals James recognized." "That's sufficient currently." I could observe him weighing if to contest, but 3 decades as my offspring had instructed him to identify when I'd resolved. "All right, half an hour. Then we contact our attorney." 60 minutes, I bargained. I hadn't haggled with my kids since their youth. It felt strangely strengthening. As Michael grudgingly withdrew to his vehicle, I trailed Maggie to the structure, Thomas following cheerfully. Every ascent on the known veranda unleashed floods of reminiscences, cradling infants amid summer downpours. James mending bent planks. Benjamin's growth notations marked in graphite on the entry frame. James preserved as much as feasible in its authentic form, Maggie remarked, unlocking the entrance. At least in framework. The arrangement mirrored the past. Broad foyer leading to a sitting area on the right, cooking space directly forward, steps to the left. But the decor differed. The sitting area contained 3 workstations with devices, storage units aligned one barrier. A broad display board showed a task list, dining timetable, and health visits. "This serves as our administrative hub now," Maggie clarified. "We needed to adapt certain areas as we expanded." "How many reside here?" I succeeded in inquiring. "At present, 47. 18 former soldiers, 8 females escaping home conflicts with 11 youngsters among them, Thomas and his parent, Rose, plus a household of 6 from Afghanistan." 47, I repeated, and James was acquainted with them all. He was familiar with every person who ever dwelled here, including the transient ones, particularly them. She guided me to the cooking area, now commercial scale with dual large ovens and a massive cooler. "We provide 3 daily meals, along with treats for the young ones." "How?" I questioned plainly. "How is this supported?" Maggie's gaze met mine. "James. That's impossible. We lacked wealth. James practiced general medicine, not concealed riches." "The terrain," she responded straightforwardly, "segments of it, anyway." The preparation surface, not my former wooden one, but a vast steel station, bore piles of youthful artwork. One drew my attention. Basic forms encircling a azure loop. The phrase "Ben's liquid" inscribed above in juvenile script. "What is Ben's liquid?" I inquired, my airway constricting. Maggie shared a glance with Thomas, who had remained remarkably silent. "The bathing zone," Thomas stated, perking up. "Where youngsters acquire skills to avoid sinking. I had blooms there each Tuesday since that's when Ben ascended to paradise." The space wavered. Maggie swiftly drew a seat. "My apologies, Mrs. Mitchell. We ought to have delayed before." "Lead me there," I cut in. "Reveal all of it." Maggie inclined her head gradually. "Initially, there's an item upstairs you must view." She directed me up the known groaning steps to what had served as our sleeping chamber. Now it was evidently Maggie's minimal, orderly residence. She proceeded to a shelf and retrieved a timber container. "James entrusted this to you. He insisted I deliver it to you prior to displaying anything further." The container was crafted by hand with Ellie embedded in iridescent shell. James had consistently crafted with wood to ease tension. I'd never encountered this container previously. I unfastened it with unsteady digits. Within rested a packet bearing my name and numerous, no, countless, secured missives below it, each dated precisely. 30 years of undelivered correspondence. The packet held a solitary sheet in James's unique script. My cherished Ellie, if this reaches you, two events have transpired. I've departed this realm, and you've returned to the farm. I've envisioned this instant countless times, pondering which would precede. My bravery to reveal the facts or my passing. It appears passing claimed victory. I've concealed truths from you, my dear. Not infidelities or hidden flaws, but an alternate existence, one I constructed parallel to our Denver life. An existence where Benjamin's remembrance acts as base rather than injury. I couldn't dispose of this terrain after losing him. Couldn't endure outsiders residing where his joy had permeated each space. But I also couldn't permit it to deteriorate. Thus, I returned initially to mourn solitarily, then to reconstruct, then to redirect. What commenced with a single displaced former soldier seeking refuge in our outbuilding has evolved into something beyond my visions. A society. I've composed a missive to you monthly for 30 years, detailing all. I never dispatched them fearing I'd reopen your scars. Maybe that was timidity masked as safeguarding. Pardon me, Ellie dear, for my concealments, for my reticence, for imposing this load upon you. But please, prior to determining this location's destiny, observe what it has transformed into. I've adored you wholly, even amid my deceit. Eternally, James. I glanced at Maggie, moisture cascading down my cheeks. You were aware throughout. For 15 years, she murmured. Since James discovered me resting in a sanctuary after departing the order, he transported me here, displayed what he'd established, and requested my aid in managing it. While I remained ignorant, I breathed. Because his affection for you prevented him from forcing recollection, she answered. The inquiry now, Mrs. Mitchell, is if you're prepared to witness what Benjamin's passing assisted in forming. Amid my weeping, I affirmed. It was the moment to confront the pond. The route to the pond remained unaltered, a mild incline amid aspens that rustled in the air. But I observed fresh elements. Seats positioned thoughtfully along the trail. Bloom beds in unexpected locations. And most astonishing, caution markers with vivid golden text. James added those following the initial households with young ones arrived. Maggie clarified, strolling next to me. No youngster is permitted near the pond without supervision. Not after Benjamin. I paused, my palm against the coarse trunk of an aspen. You utter his name without hesitation. Maggie halted. James discussed him regularly. All the young ones here are familiar with Benjamin's tale. I haven't voiced his name aloud in ages, I confessed, the admission ripping from deep within. It aches excessively. I comprehend, she stated plainly. But she couldn't truly comprehend. How could anyone fathom preparing your child's celebration pastry? Glancing out the pane, expecting to spot him with his play vehicles, only to recognize his sound had been absent too long. Racing desperately to the pond, calling his name. Spotting a tiny form adrift face downward, so motionless, so dreadfully motionless. Mrs. Mitchell, Maggie's tone drew me present. We can attempt this another time if no, I declared resolutely. Immediately. We proceeded, and I noted Thomas had vanished. Where's Thomas? I questioned. He invariably hurries forward to the tribute. It's his particular duty. The foliage thinned, and abruptly the pond extended ahead, tinier than in my terrors, but equally threatening. Its top sparkled harmlessly under the midday light. But my attention fixed on what hadn't existed before, an arched timber platform protruding over the liquid with barriers and tiers descending into a cordoned bathing zone. A modest vessel shelter stood adjacent, and at the shore's border a rock tribute where Thomas meticulously positioned field blooms. I advanced cautiously, my heartbeat pounding in my hearing. The tribute was uncomplicated yet lovely, a stone slab in a tiny plot with a copper plate set in its surface. It stated, Benjamin James Mitchell, 1975 to 1985. For each existence preserved here, his essence ascends further. Beneath that was a tinier plate. 47 youngsters have acquired secure floating skills here. Not one has perished. My legs buckled and I collapsed onto the plot seat, moisture obscuring my sight. 47 youngsters? I breathed. Maggie affirmed. James initiated floating instruction 15 years past. Every youngster residing here must acquire it. He employed qualified trainers, constructed the secure bathing zone, added rescue gear. She paused before appending, "Your grandchild was among them." My gaze lifted sharply. What? Jennifer's son, Ethan, at age 7, he nearly sank at a companion's gathering. Jennifer referenced it to James at a weekly meal, recall? Mentioned they couldn't cover the individual floating sessions the physician suggested post-event. I recalled. Jennifer had been upset. James had attended silently, then shifted topics. Classic James, uneasy with household turmoil. James covered Ethan's sessions without identification. He traveled 3 hours each weekend for 6 weeks to observe covertly from his vehicle as Ethan mastered floating at that upscale water facility in Boulder. I shook my head incredulously. Jennifer remained unaware. No one was, except me, since I needed to rearrange the former soldier's carpentry session he typically led those weekends. Maggie grinned sorrowfully. That was James, resolving issues discreetly. Thomas sneered, radiating satisfaction with his balloon display. Lovely for Ben, right? Yellow was his preferred, Mr. James informed me. Yellow had truly been Benjamin's favored hue. His sleeping space had been coated in daffodil tone. The fact caused my respiration to hitch. How many additional remembrances of our child had James sustained while I'd sealed mine away? It's exquisite, Thomas, I succeeded in saying. Desire to observe the unique bathing zone? I can float now, Mr. James instructed me. I'm no longer afraid of the liquid. Thomas gestured eagerly to the platform setup. Maggie placed a hand on his arm tenderly. Perhaps afterward, Thomas. Mrs. Mitchell requires moments. I gazed at the pond, the location I'd vilified mentally for 3 decades. The location where I'd forfeited all. Except I hadn't forfeited all. I'd forfeited Benjamin, a scar that would never mend. But I'd retained James, Michael, Jennifer, and David. I'd possessed an existence in Denver, pupils who cherished me, descendants who delivered happiness. Meanwhile, James had been here converting our catastrophe into something wondrous. While I'd been submerged in sorrow, he'd been educating youngsters to float. Why didn't he disclose to me? I questioned, not awaiting a response. But Maggie possessed one. The initial year, he arrived to mourn independently. Discovered a displaced former soldier resting in your outbuilding. A male named Robert who'd fought in Vietnam. James permitted him to remain. Then another former soldier arrived and another. She settled next to me on the seat. 5 years later, 12 individuals dwelled here. James desired to inform you then. He journeyed completely to Denver with images. Schemes to demonstrate how he was mending by assisting others. What occurred? He witnessed you chuckling with companions outside a eatery. Stated it was the initial occasion he'd observed you genuinely content since Benjamin perished. Couldn't endure reopening the injury, journeyed back here and constructed the initial lodge instead. Thomas strolled back to the tribute, singing quietly to himself. Whenever James persuaded himself you were prepared, an event would transpire. An anxiety episode when someone referenced Montana at a social gathering. Your rejection to permit Benjamin's images to be shown. Your terrors that persisted annually on his celebration. I recalled those instances, those minor indications of my ongoing fragility that I believed I'd concealed effectively. 10 years passed, Maggie proceeded. When the farm flourished with over 30 inhabitants, James ultimately composed you an extensive missive explaining all. He journeyed to Denver, resolved to present it personally. What halted him? He discovered you in Benjamin's chamber, the space you maintained precisely as when he perished. You clutched his stuffed animal, weeping. It was the commemoration. I remembered that occasion distinctly. I'd assumed I was solitary, that James attended a health symposium in Chicago. I'd never realized he'd observed me in my most intimate sorrow. Following that, Maggie stated, he formed the foundation, arranged legal provisions for the farm to persist without him. Resolved that his dual realms would stay distinct until he perished. I concluded. She affirmed. He cherished you excessively to shatter your spirit twice. A tiny voice echoed from the trail. A young girl, around 8, with fiery crimson locks that captured the light, the identical tone Benjamin's had possessed. Miss Maggie, Mama says supper requires inspection. Coming shortly, Lucy. Maggie responded, then addressed me. James's final endeavor. Lucy's dad was a Marine, perished in Iraq. Her mama couldn't manage lodging. They arrived here 6 months prior to James's departure. As if evoked by our dialogue, 12 additional individuals materialized on the trail, grown-ups and young ones directing to the pond for what was evidently a routine afternoon practice. Maggie rose. It's floating instruction period. Daily at 4, would you care to observe or prefer returning to the dwelling? I gazed at the pond, at Benjamin's tribute, at the protective measures James had added, at the young ones nearing with cloths and grins. For 30 years, I'd fled this location. For 30 years, James had been reshaping it. I'll remain, I stated. I must witness. The floating instruction was simultaneously lovely and agonizing to observe. A qualified trainer, a previous competitive hopeful named Carlos, who'd forfeited a limb in Afghanistan, Maggie clarified, directed 8 young ones through their exercises in the sectioned bathing zone. Their merriment resounded over the liquid, so contrary to my recollections of this spot. We instruct the Franklin approach, Maggie remarked as we viewed from the bank. James examined every floating curriculum nationwide before selecting it. Minimal sinking rates of any method. I noted an elder male positioned on the platform with a rescue circle and signal, attentively monitoring every youngster. Another grown-up floated in a small craft just past the bathing zone. No youngster exceeded reach from a trainer. Triple-layered protection setup, Maggie clarified, tracing my view. Trainer in liquid, observer on platform, crisis responder on vessel. Plus, all personnel hold revival certification. Benjamin had perished because no setup existed, merely a lad who'd escaped while guardians assembled his celebration treat, one instant of distraction that demolished 3 existences. Thomas rested legs crossed near the tribute, sporadically gesturing at the floaters. He appeared satisfied in his chosen duty as protector of Benjamin's remembrance. When the instruction concluded, the young ones plodded up the trail, enveloped in cloths and babbling animatedly. Lucy, the crimson-haired girl, halted before us. Did you witness me, Miss Maggie? I can drift on my rear now. Carlos states I'm prepared for stage 3. That's marvelous, dear. Maggie answered with authentic satisfaction. Lucy's inquisitive gaze shifted to me. Are you a fresh grandmother here? My grandmother's in paradise with my father. Before I could reply, a youthful female rushed over. Lucy, avoid troubling Mrs. Mitchell. She addressed me. Pardon me. I'm Andrea, Lucy's mama. It's fine, I reassured her. And yes, Lucy, I guess I am fresh here. The girl radiated. Will you observe me float tomorrow also? I'm going to master reverse strokes. Something nodded in my core. Agony, yes, but another element, too. I'd enjoy that, I found myself responding. As Andrea guided Lucy away, Maggie contacted my limb softly. Permit me to display the remainder before Michael comes back. There's considerably more to observe. We strolled back to the dwelling, following an alternate route that passed the lodges I'd noticed before. Each compact structure accommodated 2 households or 4 lone inhabitants, Maggie clarified. All constructed from property lumber, planned by a former soldier designer who discovered meaning in building residences for others after forfeiting his own kin to an intoxicated operator. Past the living zone stood the conservatory, an advanced water-based system that supplied produce throughout the seasons. James transferred the northern section last year, Maggie remarked. The portion with resource privileges utilized the funds to broaden our independence initiatives. I ceased moving. He transferred part of the farm. For what amount? Maggie wavered. $3 million. The number astonished me. What did he inform me regarding this funds? I don't recall any substantial additions. He didn't add it to your shared funds. He established the Mitchell Farm Foundation and endowed it with the earnings for longevity after his departure. $3 million concealed from me, from our offspring, expended on outsiders while Michael labored to fund his eldest child's education. While Jennifer fretted over health expenses after her spouse's dismissal, while David fought the troubles that kept him cycling through recovery. Display the records, I stated, my tone firmer than planned. All of them. Maggie affirmed, unperturbed by my response. It's all in James's workspace. We returned to the primary structure, where she directed me to a chamber off the main corridor, James's study. I'd overlooked our farmstead possessed this compact space. We'd utilized it for storage in our time here. Now it was unmistakably James's domain. His health reference volumes aligned the racks beside worn adventure tales, his secret indulgence. The workstation was his ancestor's antique that had once resided in our Denver lower level. On the barrier hung Benjamin's initial school image. I brushed the border tenderly. He maintained this here. He maintained all the kin images here. Called it his soul chamber. She advanced to the workstation and unlatched the lower compartment with a key from her garment. These are the foundation papers, land logs, and economic reports. And these, she positioned a collection of bound volumes next to the official documents, are his records, 30 years value. I settled into James's seat, tracing my digits over the uppermost record. The earliest, dated the year following Benjamin's passing. I'll provide solitude, Maggie stated, heading to the exit. But Michael will return shortly, seeking explanations. Let him linger, I answered, already unveiling the initial record with unsteady hands. The notation was dated precisely 1 month after our relocation to Denver. Returned to the farm today. Couldn't transfer it. Couldn't tolerate outsiders dwelling where Ben's merriment once resonated. Located Johnson's listing marker and removed it. Informed him via call we've reconsidered. Ellie is unaware. First concealment I've ever held from her in 15 years wed. But how do I explain I require the spot she cannot endure recalling? Rested in Ben's chamber. Discovered his play warrior beneath the mattress. Wept until dawn. I turned ahead several sheets. 3 months here now. Mended the outbuilding cover. Began removing remnants from the vernal tempest. Occupies my hands while my spirit still quests for resolutions. Ellie believes I'm at a health gathering in Seattle. Detests deceiving her, but she's resting fully now in Denver. Forming bonds at her fresh institution. Referencing Ben without collapse. My presence here would reverse all that recovery. And subsequently, a year after Benjamin's passing, encountered a male resting in the outbuilding today. Robert Winters, Vietnam combatant, no residence, no kin, eyes mirroring mine. Tormented. Provided him supper. He inquired if he could remain and aid with fixes for lodging. Agreed before considering. Feels appropriate having another being here. The farm was never intended to be vacant. 5 years later, 12 individuals dwelling here now. Robert introduced others. All former soldiers, all displaced, decent men in difficult circumstances. We restored the sleeping quarters, added a washroom to the former equipment space. They're restoring the farm, and it's restoring them. Should inform Ellie. Journeyed to Denver planning to. Witnessed her chuckling with companions outside that Mediterranean eatery she adores. First authentic chuckles I've observed since Ben. Couldn't tolerate reopening the scar. Returned and commenced building a genuine lodge instead. The men merit proper refuge. And 10 years after, encountered Margaret Santos today. Uses Maggie, ex-religious who departed her group after disclosing mistreatment the institution attempted to conceal. Found her resting in St. Michael's Sanctuary when I was in Billings for materials. Something in her evoked Ellie. That identical quiet resilience provided her the instructing role for the young ones. We possess 5 kids residing here now, all with guardians addressing dependency or confinement. Require someone with instructional experience. When she viewed the farm, what we've formed, she wept. Stated she'd located her authentic vocation after all. Believe I have too. With quivering hands, I turned to the concluding record. The notations from merely last year. Physician states my cardiac function is declining. 6 months, perhaps fewer. Haven't informed Ellie. Can't endure witnessing the dread in her gaze. Must utilize this period to secure the farms tomorrow. The foundation is almost prepared. Maggie will assume full control. She essentially manages all already. Just need to guarantee the resources endure. Transferred the northern section to Miller Extraction. $3 million. Informed Ellie I was at a heart symposium in Houston. Additional deceptions to shield her. Utilized the funds to construct lasting lodging for the former soldiers. Add the solar setup. Enhance the conservatory. Acquire health tools. The farm will be independent now. My inheritance to Ben, reshaping the site of his passing into a haven of existence. The ultimate notation dated merely 2 weeks prior to his abrupt cardiac failure. Created recording for Ellie today near Ben's tribute. Attempted to clarify all. 47 youngsters have mastered floating here now. 47 existences possibly preserved. One for each year Ben would have existed if I'd monitored him better that day. My atonement. My salvation. Hoping someday Ellie will grasp why I concealed this from her, why I formed this concealed existence. Not from scarcity of affection, from its excess. The farm is prepared. I am prepared, but I dread I'm imposing an unmanageable load on her. The facts. I shut the record as the noise of vehicle entrances closing resounded from outside. Michael had come back, and he'd brought support. Jennifer's luxury vehicle and David's two-wheeler now positioned beside Michael's transport. All 3 of my remaining offspring had arrived, prepared to dispose of their siblings' inheritance without my input. This is ridiculous. Michael's tone carried through the study's open pane. Occupancy claims aren't valid anymore, particularly when the true proprietors are present. I swiftly dried my moisture, storing James's records in the workstation compartment. My 3 offspring stood in the front area, facing Maggie, who preserved her typical composure. As I've clarified, Mr. Mitchell, this land is managed in foundation. I'm merely the overseer, Maggie was stating as I emerged onto the veranda. Your mom is the one to address. 3 faces pivoted to me. Jennifer advanced quickly, her legal sharpened senses instantly evaluating my swollen eyes. Mother, what have these individuals been claiming? Are you all right? I'm okay, I responded, astonished by the stability in my tone. And they're not these individuals, Jennifer. They're inhabitants of Mitchell Farm. Mitchell Farm ceased 30 years past, Michael countered. This is merely terrain we possess that evidently has been occupied by outsiders. James's record indicates differently, I answered. He's been arriving here monthly since Benjamin perished, forming something remarkable. Dad, David uttered for the initial occasion, bewilderment clear on his features. He'd always been the empathetic one, so akin to James in disposition. Dad was operating this spot all these years, not operating it, Maggie inserted softly. Forming it, supporting it, cherishing it, and deceiving about it, Michael interjected. If what you're claiming is accurate, he deceived us all for decades. A valid observation, one that still pained despite the background I'd gathered from James's records. He did, I conceded, to safeguard me, to maintain Benjamin's remembrance. Ben has departed 30 years, Jennifer remarked, her tone softening at my evident upset. We all cherished him, Mother. But this, she motioned around at the active society behind us. This is insanity. Dad concealing millions in family resources to support some private benevolence effort. 3 million precisely, I stated. From the northern section transfer last year. Michael's features darkened. 3 million? You're joking? I requested Dad's assistance with Tyler's education fees last spring. He claimed finances were limited with retirement approaching. And my health costs after Greg's dismissal, Jennifer appended. He recommended exploring installment options. I hadn't been aware of these particulars. In our union, James managed our finances, and I'd willingly permitted it. Now, I pondered what else I might have overlooked. David, still quiet, was observing the operations around the farm. A cluster of former soldiers was returning from the lands, implements over their arms. Females assembled young ones for supper. Thomas gestured animatedly when he noticed us. I desire to witness all, I proclaimed. Before we debate this spot's future, I need to grasp what James formed. Mother, the extraction firm agent, is convening with us here tomorrow. Michael objected. 25 million, Mother. That's over 6 million apiece for us. Your descendants' education reserves. Your later years' security. One day, Michael. I'm requesting one day to discover the reality about your dad's existence. Something in my manner must have conveyed my resolve because Michael exhaled in surrender. All right, one day. Then we negotiate conditions. Jennifer appeared less persuaded. I'm contacting Greg. He should examine these alleged foundation papers. That's your prerogative. I concurred. David, will you remain? My youngest affirmed, still observing Thomas, who was now hastening toward us, gesturing something in his grasp. Mrs. Mitchell, I located Ben's image. He pushed a bordered picture to me. Benjamin on his 7th celebration, missing tooth grin beaming at the lens as he displayed his fresh angling tool proudly. James had captured the image right here on this veranda. Where did you obtain this? I breathed. Mr. James's unique chamber. He displayed me all the images. Stated I needed to recognize Ben because we would have been companions. Thomas's guileless features clouded. These folks are upset. Are they forcing you to evict us? I sensed my offspring stiffen beside me. Employing someone with Down syndrome as a sentimental tool would only reinforce Michael's determination to empty the land. No one's departing yet, Thomas, I reassured him, taking the picture. We're merely discussing. Good, because you need to view the equines and the learning center and Robert's carpentry area, and Rose prepares the finest fruit dessert on Thursdays. His enthusiasm was tangible and utterly sincere. David advanced, extending his palm to Thomas. I'd enjoy viewing the equines. I'm David, Mrs. Mitchell's offspring. Thomas's features illuminated. Ben's sibling. Mr. James stated you were skilled with equines when small. A darkness crossed David's features. A flash of hurt swiftly concealed. Did he? He murmured. Stated you could murmur to them. Calm the frightened ones. Thomas clasped David's palm and started tugging him to the barns. We have a fresh mare. She's frightened of all. Maybe you can assist. David glanced back at me, something exposed and inquiring in his gaze. Proceed, I urged him. I'd like to learn what else your dad mentioned about you. As they departed, Michael shook his head. Incredible. They've placed influencers everywhere, pulling at emotions. Mother, can't you perceive what's transpiring? They're controlling you. Or perhaps your dad left more of himself here than in Denver, I countered, surprising myself with the notion. I need to witness it all, Michael. You can depart or remain, but I'm not authorizing anything tomorrow until I know precisely what I'd be demolishing. Jennifer's device rang. Her spouse, Greg, undoubtedly. She stepped aside to respond. Legal tactics already shaping. Mother, be sensible. Michael lowered his tone. Even if Dad did establish the spot, even if he did concern for these folks, they're outsiders. We're his kin. Are we? I challenged, gripping Benjamin's picture. How much time did you devote with your dad in the past year, Michael? How many occasions did you contact just to converse, not to request something? The inquiry hit target. Michael's mouth tightened. That's unjust. No, it isn't. I concurred. Just as it wasn't just that your dad concealed this spot from us, but I'm starting to grasp why. I turned to Maggie, who had been observing our kin turmoil with courteous separation. Display me all. Beginning with how James supported the spot before last year's resource transfer. Michael made a final effort. The foundation papers might not even be valid. Dad wasn't legal expert. No, emerged a fresh tone from behind us. But I am, and they're unbreakable. We pivoted to see an aged male in a mobility chair nearing, propelled by a middle-aged female. Robert Winters, he presented himself. Initial inhabitant and legal advisor for the Mitchell Farm Foundation since its start 15 years past. You're a legal expert? Michael inquired disbelievingly. The elder male's gaze crinkled with humor. Vietnam prior. Harvard legal after. Dependency and trauma in between. Your dad found me resting in his outbuilding and granted me meaning again. He raised a hide folder. Care to examine the papers, young fellow? I'd be pleased to guide you through the provisions. Michael's assurance visibly wavered. Supper's in half an hour. The female propelling Robert's chair declared. We'd be privileged if the Mitchell kin would participate. Grace at 6 precisely. Maggie addressed me. Rose assigns the meal duties. She was lead cook at the Premier Lodge in Billings before joint issues compelled retirement. Thomas's mama? I surmised. Maggie affirmed. James located them residing in their vehicle 10 years past. Thomas experienced convulsions. They couldn't cover his treatment. I thought of Thomas's cheerful nature, his committed bloom placements at Benjamin's tribute. How altered his existence might have been without James's involvement. Will remain for supper, I resolved, gazing pointedly at my offspring. All of us. Jennifer rejoined us, device gripped firmly. Greg states we should record all. Capture images. That's a beginning, I concurred. To comprehend what your dad prized enough to conceal from us for 30 years. As we proceeded to the eating area, transformed from our former outbuilding, I noted David afar, positioned quietly beside an anxious mare, his palms softly caressing her neck while Thomas observed in wonder. For the initial time since James's passing, I sensed something alter within me. A fissure in the base of sorrow that had shaped my being. Not mending, not yet, but potential. And in my grasp, Benjamin grinned from his picture, perpetually 7, eternally preserved at the spot I'd escaped, and James had reshaped. The eating area astonished me. Our former outbuilding, where we'd once kept fodder and machinery, had been converted into a cozy, inviting space with extended timber surfaces, a rock hearth, and barriers adorned with creations evidently made by the young ones who resided here. Timber supports extended above, adorned with sparkling illuminations that lent the vast area a close-knit atmosphere. James planned it personally, Maggie clarified as we entered. Stated every kin merits a suitable supper surface. A dozen circular surfaces occupied the space, each arranged with varied but tidy dishes and utensils. Inhabitants were already assembling, grown-ups aiding young ones to settle, adolescents dispensing liquid containers. The ambience was animated but structured, like a practiced routine where all knew their part. Michael, Jennifer, and I positioned awkwardly just within the entry. Outsiders in a location bearing our kin name. David had yet to return from the barns. A petite female with pure white strands neared us, supporting heavily on a staff. "You must be Eleanor," she remarked, her joint-distorted palms extending to mine. "I'm Rose. James referenced you constantly." I clasped her twisted digits tenderly. "You're Thomas's mama?" "Yes," she grinned, showing indentations matching her son's. "And James's distant relative, though he was unaware when he located us. Only uncovered the link when I mentioned my birth name was Mitchell from the Kentucky branch, not the Montana one." I blinked astonished. James never informed me. Probably considered it irrelevant. "Kin is who you select, not solely who shares your lineage." She motioned to a surface near the hearth. "That's our kin surface. James always positioned there when visiting. Would you participate?" Before I could reply, Michael advanced. Just Rose, dear." "Rose," he proceeded rigidly. "I understand you've dwelled here a while, but you should realize this land is being transferred tomorrow." Rose's grin remained steady. "Is that true? Well, maybe after supper you'll think otherwise. Nourishment tends to alter viewpoints." She turned back to me. "James's seat has sat vacant 6 months now. Would warm my spirit to see it occupied again." I sensed Jennifer tense beside me, readying legal contentions against sentimental control. But Rose wasn't controlling. She was mourning just as I was. I'd be privileged, I informed her, disregarding Michael's disapproving gaze. We followed Rose to the surface where Thomas was already placed, energetically recounting to an adolescent female about Ben's sibling who could communicate with equines. David emerged moments after, settling into the seat beside Thomas, a gentle grin on his lips. The first authentic grin I'd witnessed from him since James's burial. "The mare's name is Whisper," he informed me as I settled. "Saved from a cruel competition facility. She's going to recover with duration and tolerance." "Duration and tolerance," Rose repeated. "James's remedy for all injuries, creature or person." A chime sounded softly and the eating area quieted. Maggie positioned at the front, palms joined. As usual, before dining, we exchange our appreciations. Tonight is unique as we greet Dr. Mitchell's kin. A whisper spread through the space as faces turned to us. Eleanor, Michael, Jennifer, and David have arrived to discover the farm. Let's extend them the identical compassion James extended each of us. One after another, individuals around the space rose to share brief thanks. A former soldier with an artificial limb appreciated the society for aiding his rehabilitation. A youthful parent expressed thanks for youngster supervision that permitted her to participate in virtual lessons. An adolescent lad clumsily appreciated his arithmetic mentor for assisting him succeed in a test. When they concluded, Thomas leaped up eagerly. I'm appreciative Ben's mama came to visit us and his sibling can communicate with whisper. All gazes turned expectantly to me. I hadn't readied for this custom, had no appreciation immediately available amid the storm of disclosures. But surveying these features, individuals whose existences James had influenced while I stayed oblivious, I located words. I'm appreciative to learn that while I was safeguarding Benjamin's remembrance by sealing it away, James was respecting it by establishing this. My tone faltered. Thank you for demonstrating another method to recall my child. A gentle whisper of endorsement rippled through the space. Even Jennifer appeared touched, though she swiftly concealed it when she noticed Michael observing her. Rose pressed my palm as supper was presented kin-style. Robust plant broth, fresh loaves, and leafy salads that Maggie informed us originated from the conservatory. The repast was basic but tasty, evidently crafted with attention. As we dined, inhabitants paused at our surface to present themselves. Robert Winters, the legal expert I'd encountered earlier, recounted tales of the farm's early periods. A previous educator named Elena outlined the learning initiative for young ones who faltered in standard institutions. A reserved male named Sammy, who I discovered had served as translator for U.S. forces in Afghanistan, conveyed his thanks for the refuge granted to his kin when their unique permissions left them displaced in America. James covered our migration legal expert, Sammy murmured. When the structure failed us, he formed a spot for us to fit while we battled for valid standing. Michael stayed silent during these exchanges, though I noted him observing a youthful lad at the adjacent surface who was eagerly displaying a sketch to his mama, a basic kin group before a plain dwelling, home, scripted in unsteady letters above it. Jennifer, always the legal mind, posed sharp inquiries about the farm's valid framework, support systems, and longevity strategies. Robert responded each query with expert accuracy, occasionally citing papers he vowed to supply for her examination. The resource privileges transfer was validly arranged as a benevolent gift, he clarified. The earnings went straight into the Foundation's reserve fund, which is why it never showed in personal funds. Tax evasion, Jennifer whispered. Tax strategy, Robert amended mildly. Entirely valid and moral. The Revenue Service has examined the Foundation twice and found all orderly. David scarcely spoke, satisfied to attend to Thomas's eager babble about equines, floating, and the creative healing sessions he participated twice weekly. I observed my youngest offspring attentively. Of my three, David had battled most after Benjamin's passing. Night wandering, terrors, isolation. Merely 7 when his sibling sank, he'd never wholly handled the injury. Now observing him with Thomas, I glimpsed the recovery that had evaded him. As treat, Rose's renowned fruit dessert was presented. A youthful girl neared our surface with a crafted greeting. Lucy, the crimson head from the floating instruction. I created this for you, she stated timidly, positioning it before me. Miss Maggie stated you're sorrowful because Dr. James ascended to paradise. The greeting displayed a juvenile illustration of a grinning sun above a pond inside in meticulous script. When we feel sorrow, Dr. James stated to seek assistance. We can serve as your assistants now. Moisture filled my gaze. James's preferred inspirational quote. Seek the assistance had become his existence guiding principle, it appeared. Thank you, Lucy. I succeeded. It's lovely. As she bounded away, Michael ultimately broke his reticence. This is all very moving, Mother. But these benevolent acts don't alter that Dad deceived us for decades, concealed funds, formed this elaborate alternate existence. While you were vacationing in resorts, David remarked abruptly, his tone unusually keen. While Jennifer was advancing professionally, while I cycled through recovery, Michael reddened. That's unjust, isn't it? David contested. When's the last occasion you inquired Dad about his existence, not about finances or guidance or advances, just about him? An uneasy hush descended over our surface. Rose patted my palm tenderly. Kin, she murmured. Always the most intricate affection tale. As supper ended, inhabitants commenced their evening patterns. Some cleared surfaces, others oversaw young ones' studies. Still others assembled for what seemed a assistance gathering in a nook. Standard evening at Mitchell Farm, Maggie clarified as she joined us. Everyone contributes based on their capabilities. Everyone's requirements are fulfilled based on their situations. Sounds like collectivism, Michael whispered. Sounds like kin, I countered. And as I observed this society, these outsiders bonded by James's vision, I realized they recognized a facet of my spouse I'd never witnessed. While I'd been wed to James Mitchell, household physician and committed partner, these folks had known James Mitchell, dreamer and rescuer. I pondered which rendition was more genuine, or if perhaps both held equal validity. Darkness descended over the farm, stars appearing in the broad Montana heavens with a radiance I'd overlooked in Denver's illuminated outskirts. Maggie had provided lodging, Michael and Jennifer in visitor chambers in the primary structure, David gladly lodging in the barns at Thomas's persistent request, and me in James's quarters above his workspace. He maintained a chamber here? I'd inquired, astonished. For his extended stays, Maggie had clarified when he remained several days to supervise building efforts or health stations. The area was undeniably James, minimal but considerate in its elements. A single bed with the wool covers he favored, shelves aligned with health publications and worn frontier stories. A compact workstation beneath a pane overlooking the land. And images, dozens in basic borders covering one full barrier. I settled now on the border of his bed, inspecting these captures of James's concealed existence. There he was with Robert, limbs draped around each other's arms before a partially constructed lodge. James crouching beside Thomas on an angling platform. James in a holiday cap, allocating gifts to radiant young ones. James beside a female in a mobility chair, both smiling widely as she raised a certificate. Not one image of me or Michael, Jennifer, or David. Those resided in his Denver workspace. I realized he had maintained his realms entirely distinct, not solely for my safeguarding, but perhaps for his own mental ease. A gentle tap interrupted my reflections. Jennifer positioned in the entry, her expert manner slightly softened by weariness. "May I enter?" I affirmed, tapping the space beside me. She settled, her gaze immediately drawn to the image barrier. "It's unreal," she remarked after an instant, like uncovering Dad possessed another kin. "He did in a manner," I conceded. "But not the sort you're imagining. Greg has examined the foundation papers," she proceeded, her legal accuracy returning. "They're authentic. Dad formed an unchangeable benevolent foundation 15 years past with the farm as the main resource. We can't transfer it, Mother. Not without a drawn-out ballad conflict that we'd probably forfeit." I absorbed this data, surprised to discover myself eased rather than worried. What about the resource privileges proposal? The Foundation possesses those too. Though there's a provision permitting restricted removal with ecological protections, she exhaled. Nothing like the total demolition method the extraction firm desires. So, no 25 million bonus. No. She glanced sideways at me. Michael's handling it poorly. He's been relying on that funds to grow his enterprise. I thought of Michael's opulent residence in an upscale area, his leisure property in a resort town, his offspring in exclusive institutions. He's fared well enough without it. We all have, Jennifer conceded. Even David, when he's clear-headed. We settled in agreeable hush, examining the photographic proof of James's parallel existence. Why didn't he disclose to us? Jennifer ultimately questioned, the legal facade fracturing to reveal the injured offspring beneath. Did he believe we wouldn't comprehend? That we'd attempt to halt him? I think, I remarked gradually. He dreaded what awareness would do to me, and once that habit of concealment was set, it became simpler to sustain than to shatter. But all that funds, Mother. 3 million that could have aided his own kin. I motioned toward the photos. These folks became his kin too. Jenny, examine their features. Truly look. She inspected the captures more attentively, her demeanor softening. They all gaze at him like he rescued them. I concluded. Because he did. Another tap and Michael emerged, his features taut with scarcely restrained fury. Incredible. Jennifer's verified it. Dad undermined us all with his concealed benevolence effort. Michael, I reprimanded. That's unjust. Unjust? He mocked. What's unjust is learning your dad led a dual existence for 30 years. What's unjust is discovering the legacy you relied on doesn't exist because he donated it all to outsiders. They're not outsiders to him, Jennifer remarked quietly, astonishing me with her change in view. Examine these photos, Michael. Truly examine them. I don't care, he retorted. He deceived us, Mother, for decades. How can you be so composed about this? Before I could reply, David emerged behind Michael, his demeanor unusually peaceful. Because she grasps what you don't, Mike. Dad didn't do this opposing us. He did it for Ben. Don't involve Benjamin in this, Michael cautioned, his tone dropping threateningly. This has no relation to him. It has every relation to him, David persisted. This entire spot exists due to what happened to Ben. It's Dad's method of creating good from horror. He entered the chamber, addressing me directly. Maggie displayed me the recording. Mother, the one Dad created at the tribute. What recording? I questioned, though I recalled Maggie referencing it earlier. Dad captured messages at Ben's tribute for 30 years on the commemoration. David's gaze was suspiciously glossy. Maggie states there's one he created specifically for you to view when prepared. Michael raised his arms in revulsion. More controlling spectacles. It's not spectacles, David stated resolutely. It's Dad speaking to Mother, and I think she merits to hear him. Jennifer placed a tender palm on my limb. You don't have to view it now, Mother, or ever if you prefer not. But I was already rising. Where is it? David guided us downstairs to James's workspace, where Maggie awaited, a portable device in her grasp. I wasn't certain if tonight was appropriate, she remarked hesitantly. But when David requested, I desire to view it, I stated, my tone steadier than I sensed. We'll provide solitude, Maggie proposed, but I shook my head. No, my offspring should view this too. I settled at James's workstation, my remaining offspring gathering behind me as Maggie prepared the device and discreetly departed. The recording commenced with James's features filling the display. My spouse evidently in his final months, though I hadn't acknowledged his decline then. The time mark indicated it was captured just 3 weeks before his passing. Behind him positioned Benjamin's tribute, adorned with blooms as James dried a tear. By the time either of us realized he'd gone to the liquid alone, I felt Jennifer's palm on my arm, squeezing firmly. I couldn't disclose to you then. You were so shattered, Ellie, and I was timid. Observing you blame yourself was simpler than admitting I'd granted permission. As the years progressed, it became impossible to admit. How do you inform someone you've allowed them to bear unmerited culpability for decades? James inhaled deeply, steadying himself. So instead, I attempted to compensate, to make Benjamin's passing signify something. Every youngster taught to float securely, every former soldier given meaning, every kin sheltered. They're all part of our child's inheritance. The lad who adored everyone, who never encountered an outsider, who desired to rescue every stray creature we found. He endures in this spot, Ellie, in ways I couldn't clarify without exposing my own fault. Behind me, Michael emitted a soft injured noise. I don't know if you can pardon me, James proceeded. For Benjamin, for the deceptions, for establishing this spot without you, but I hope someday you'll perceive that in my flawed manner. I was attempting to honor both our child and you, the female who taught me that affection is about elevating others. He leaned nearer to the lens. The foundation will safeguard the farm after I'm gone. The society can persist without me, but it would prosper with your spirit directing it, Ellie. If you can locate it in yourself to pardon me, to accept what grew from our greatest forfeiture, there's space for you here. Space for all our kin if they select it, James grinned mournfully. I've adored you wholly, Eleanor Mitchell. Even in my deceit, and Benjamin would be so proud of the existences preserved in his name. The display darkened for several pulses. None of us shifted or spoke. Then Michael pivoted suddenly and departed the chamber. Jennifer, moisture cascading down her features, squeezed my arm once more before trailing him. David stayed, his palm resting tenderly on my back as 30 years of misplaced culpability washed over me in surges of sorrow and disclosure. He knew I breathed. All these years, he knew I blamed myself and he blamed himself, David remarked quietly. So he established all this to compensate. I gazed up at my youngest offspring, abruptly perceiving him with fresh clarity. "You're not furious about the funds." David shook his head. "I never concerned about that." And after witnessing this spot, grasping what Dad formed. "I'm proud of him, Mother." For the first time since Ben perished, I feel like our kin accomplished something significant. As the darkness deepened around the farm, Benjamin's farm, James's vision, I began to grasp the inheritance my spouse had left, not just for outsiders, but for us. A method to convert our kin's greatest catastrophe into meaning. If only I could locate the fortitude to embrace it. Morning light broke over the farm with a magnificent display of hues, violets, and tangerines streaking the broad Montana heavens. I'd scarcely rested, devoting hours perusing James's records after viewing his admission recording. Each notation unveiled another fragment of the complex pattern he'd formed in our child's memory. I positioned now on the veranda of the primary structure, beverage cup warming my palms, observing the farm awaken. Former soldiers directed to the conservatory. Young ones assembled for morning meal before learning. A group of females departed for their positions in adjacent communities, sharing transport in one of the farm's conveyances. This efficient society had operated without me, without my awareness, for decades. "Early awakener like your spouse," came Rose's tone as she joined me, advancing slowly with her staff. James always remarked dawn over the peaks was divine's daily prompt that splendor follows obscurity. That echoes him. I concurred, creating space for her on the seat. He was always the hopeful one in our union. Yet he bore such culpability, Rose remarked softly. Sometimes when he believed no one observed, the burden showed in his gaze. I never perceived it, I conceded. How did I not perceive it? Because he didn't desire you to. Rose patted my palm. James was adept at separating. Physician mode, partner mode, farm mode, each distinct and separate. 3 decades of deceit, I pondered. I keep attempting to feel anger, but all I sense is sorrow, for the joint recovery you might have possessed, for the years you could have participated in this. A compact figure dashed across the area. Thomas heading for the barns where David had passed the night. My youngest offspring emerged, locks disheveled from rest, grinning at Thomas's zeal. Your offspring fits here, Rose remarked, following my view. I've never witnessed Thomas bond with someone so rapidly. Not since James. I considered David's battles over the years, the recovery periods, the melancholy, the challenge-sustaining connections. David has always been questing for something, meaning. Perhaps we possess that plentifully here, Rose answered. What we lack are sufficient hands to distribute the burden. Before I could reply, Michael's luxury vehicle entered the area. He departed last night after the recording, traveling to a lodging in the closest community. Now he returned, his demeanor inscrutable as he neared the veranda. Morning, he remarked stiffly. Jennifer's en route. We need to converse, Mother. Rose grasped the implication, rising gradually. I'll leave you to your kin matters, but Eleanor, when prepared, Maggie has something for you in James's workspace. After she departed, Michael settled beside me, exhaling deeply. I didn't rest last night. Neither did I conceded. I kept reflecting on Dad's recording, about Benjamin, about all of this. He motioned vaguely toward the active farm. I was 12 when Ben perished. Mature enough to comprehend, but immature to handle it correctly. I recall resolving someone had to be the resilient one for you and Dad. You were, I remarked softly, so accountable, so mature instantly. I resented it, he admitted. Resented forfeiting both Ben and my youth in one day. Resented Dad for collapsing when I required him most. I'd never heard Michael express this way. My eldest had always been the pragmatic one, the unfeeling one, the accomplished one who never reflected back. And then last night, he proceeded, observing Dad admit, witnessing his culpability, his agony. It was like encountering an outsider. The father I recognized would never have maintained such concealments. None of us recognized him fully, I stated. Not even me. Michael's mouth tightened. The fund still troubles me, Mother. $3 million granted to outsiders while his own kin labored. Jennifer's health debt after Greg's dismissal. David's recovery expenses. My enterprise growth advances. We weren't laboring, Michael. I amended tenderly. We were comfortable, advantaged. Even these folks possessed nothing. They're not our duty. They were to James. And maybe that's what kin truly signifies, extending duty beyond lineage. I examined my son's features, perceiving the lad he'd been beneath the accomplished entrepreneur he'd become. Your dad established something extraordinary here, Michael. Something that respects Benjamin in ways I never could. Michael gazed away, observing as David and Thomas guided equines from the barn. Dad's recording mentioned space for all our kin here. What did he imply? I don't know yet, I conceded, but I plan to discover. Jennifer's vehicle arrived, positioning beside Michael's. She emerged with her spouse, Greg, both appearing grave. We need to debate the valid ramifications, she remarked without introduction as they joined us. The foundation is valid, but there may be methods to reorganize it that advantage both the farm and our kin. Always the legal mind, Michael whispered. Someone must be realistic, she retorted. $25 million remains available from the extraction firm. If we can bargain restricted removal privileges that don't relocate inhabitants. No, I interjected, astonishing myself with my surety. No extraction. Not yet. Not until I comprehend all James established here. Greg cleared his airway. Mrs. Mitchell, with respect, the proposal won't remain available forever. The firm has alternate choices. Then let them pursue those choices, I stated resolutely. This terrain was Benjamin's play area, James's haven, and now residence to dozens with no other option. I won't hasten to choices that demolish any of that. Jennifer and Greg exchanged glances, evidently having anticipated a different reply. Maggie desires to see me, I proceeded, rising. Something James left. Will you participate? We located Maggie in James's workspace, a worn hide container on the workstation before her. These are the missives, she remarked simply. One for each month over 30 years. James composed them after every stay, but never dispatched them. 360 missives, Jennifer computed aloud. 362, Maggie amended. He was very methodical. I neared the container reverently, raising the cover to reveal clusters of packets, each bound with cord and marked by year. Have you perused them? I questioned Maggie. No, she answered. They were for you solely. James was explicit about that. I chose the earliest cluster from the year after Benjamin perished. The initial packet was addressed in James's known script. For Ellie, when you're prepared to know. With quivering digits, I opened it and began to recite aloud. My dearest Ellie, I've just devoted my first weekend back at the farm since we departed. I informed you I was at a health gathering in Portland. Pardon the deceit. I couldn't transfer this spot, Ellie. Not where Ben's essence still feels so near. The pond torments me as it does you, but somehow being here, confronting it directly, brings a peculiar tranquility that escapes me in Denver. Today, I mended the platform where he used to angle. Tomorrow, I'll clear the route to the field where he launched his kite. Small gestures of recollection that feel like devotion. A local former soldier, Robert Winters, has been resting in our outbuilding. Instead of summoning authorities, I've invited him to remain to assist with men's. He has the same empty gaze we do, Ellie. The gaze of someone who has forfeited something irreplaceable. Perhaps that's why I permitted him to stay, because he comprehends that some scars never fully mend. They just become integral to who you are. I desire to inform you about this spot, about how it feels both tormented and restorative. But when I contacted home tonight and heard the buoyancy in your tone as you described your fresh instructing role, I couldn't endure reopening wounds that are finally beginning to heal. So I bear this secret currently. This minor comfort that helps me respire when sorrow threatens to overwhelm me. Perhaps someday we can share it. Until then, know that in this spot where we forfeited our child, I am sustaining his memory in the only method I know. By aiding others who are adrift themselves. All my affection, James. I gazed up, moisture blurring my sight. Michael stood stiff, his demeanor conflicted. Jennifer dried her eyes discreetly. Greg examined the ground, an outsider witnessing our kin's raw vulnerability. There are hundreds more, Maggie remarked softly. Recording everything, the first former soldiers' lodge, the conservatory addition, the floating initiative, Thomas and Rose's arrival, the foundation creation. James documented it all for you. He desired me to know, I realized, just not until he thought I could endure it, or until he was gone and couldn't witness your agony, Michael proposed, his tone rougher than usual. Either way, Jennifer remarked, he left us a guide to his soul, to the existence he led without us. I replaced the missive in its packet, overwhelmed by the scale of what lay before me. Hundreds of admissions, clarifications, invitations to comprehend the spouse I thought I'd known fully. There's more, Maggie remarked hesitantly. James left directives for all of you. If you chose to accept the farm, what kind of directives? Jennifer questioned. Legal mode, engaging opportunities, Maggie clarified. Ways each of you could participate in the farm's future if you desired. He never presumed you would, but he hoped. I thought of James's words in the recording. There's space for all our kin here if they select it. Display us, I stated. As Maggie retrieved another file from James's workstation, I caught David observing from the entry, Thomas beside him. My youngest son's demeanor held something I hadn't witnessed in years. Optimism. And in that instant, I began to grasp what James had always known, that recovery doesn't come from fleeing catastrophe, but from reshaping it into meaning. The inquiry was whether our broken kin could find unity in continuing what James had initiated or whether his dual existence would ultimately separate us further. Maggie unveiled the file and removed several papers, each bearing one of our names. James prepared these during his final months when his cardiac condition worsened. He never informed anyone about his diagnosis, not even me, until the very end. Another concealment. How many had my spouse borne to protect those he cherished? He called these his inheritance suggestions, Maggie proceeded, handing each of us our designated packet. Mine was thicker than the others, its weight notable in my unsteady palms. Michael ripped his open instantly, scanning the contents with narrowed gaze. Jennifer, ever the systematic one, carefully inserted a finger beneath the flap, preserving the packet as potential proof. David accepted his with respect, but made no move to open it, observing his siblings' reactions instead. I broke the seal on mine, finding several sheets covered in James's exact script. The first sheet began simply, Dearest Eleanor, if you're perusing this, you've uncovered Mitchell Farm and all it includes. You've learned of my 3-decade deceit or devotion, depending on your view. The inquiry now is, what transpires next? I've set valid protections for this society through the Foundation, ensuring it can continue without us, but it would thrive with Mitchell kin participation, not from duty, but from selection. The selection to convert our kin's greatest catastrophe into its most significant inheritance. For you, my beloved partner, I suggest the role you were always destined for, society chronicler and soul guardian. Your talent as a past instructor, your skill to help others link to history while building toward tomorrow. These abilities are urgently required here. The young ones need to understand their origins to envision their paths. The former soldiers need their tales preserved with honor. And Benjamin's memory needs to be integrated throughout, not as a specter that torments, but as the base that upholds. Should you accept, the Foundation provides a modest compensation and residing quarters, our old residence restored to ease, but preserved in spirit. More crucially, it offers meaning for your later years and recovery for your spirit. The choice is wholly yours. You may opt to visit sporadically, to maintain distance, or to embrace this spot fully. All I request is that you consider the chance that in fleeing this terrain for 30 years, you may have been fleeing your own recovery. With eternal affection, James. Additional sheets detailed practical issues, financial arrangements, transitional support, even program ideas for historical initiatives. James had anticipated everything, planning for a tomorrow he wouldn't witness. I gazed up to find Michael rising abruptly, his suggestion wrinkled in his grip. Incredible, he whispered. What did yours state? Jennifer questioned, her own sheets held protectively against her torso. Michael chuckled bitterly. Dad wants me to apply my enterprise insight to create sustainable income sources for the farm. Suggested I move my investment company's branch to Billings and act as the Foundation's economic consultant. Even outlined growth chances for nature tourism and healing retreat offerings that could benefit the society and provide career satisfaction. He planned that extensively. Jennifer seemed impressed despite herself. "Oh, it improves," Michael proceeded. "He's offering equivalent funds from the foundation for any investment I make in farm ventures. A collaboration, he terms it, as if I'd uproot my whole existence to oversee his secret benevolence project." The acrimony in his tone didn't quite conceal the underlying injury. The offspring who'd built his own accomplishment, feeling his dad had been scheming a different tomorrow for him all along. "What about yours?" I questioned Jennifer tenderly. She swallowed difficultly. "Legal supervision. Dad proposes I establish a nonprofit legal practice focusing on former soldiers' benefits, migrant protections, and home violence safeguards, all concerns affecting farm inhabitants. He's arranged guidance with Robert and links to support groups in Billings." Her tone softened. "He writes that my zeal for fairness has always surpassed my ambition for business achievement, even when you couldn't acknowledge it to yourself." I perceived the conflict in her gaze. The driven legal expert who'd battled for associate status at her renowned firm abruptly confronted with an alternate view of her career identity. "David," I prompted, noticing my youngest still clutching his unopened packet. He shook his head. "I don't need to peruse it. I already know." "Know what?" Michael demanded. "That Dad perceived me clearly when the rest of you saw only my shortcomings." David's tone held no blame, just plain truth, that he understood why I kept disintegrating in the organized world you all navigated so effortlessly. "You don't know what he suggested," Jennifer pointed out. "Something with the equines," David remarked confidently. "Something that utilizes my compassion rather than treating it as a flaw. Something that recognizes I've been searching for meaning since Ben perished." Maggie nodded slightly, confirming David's intuition without revealing details. Michael paced the small workspace, agitation evident in every motion. "This is emotional control from beyond the grave. Dad spent 30 years living a double life, and now he expects us to abandon our current lives to continue his secret project. I have a kin in Denver, a thriving enterprise, kids in institutions they adore." "He doesn't expect anything," I corrected tenderly. "He's offering possibilities, while leveraging guilt and emotion," Michael retorted. "Classic Dad, making sentimental appeals appear like logical choices." Jennifer studied her sheets thoughtfully. "The suggestions are surprisingly practical, though. Dad researched the legal obstacles to what he's proposing for me. He's included contact details for organizations already interested in collaboration. It's comprehensive." "Of course it is." Michael scoffed. "Dad had 30 years to plan how to draw us into this place after he departed. Or 30 years to understand what might bring each of us fulfillment." David suggested quietly. "Fulfillment we haven't found in the lives we've built." Michael rounded on him. "Speak for yourself. Some of us are perfectly fulfilled. Are you, Mike?" David challenged, unusual confidence in his voice. "Is that why you work 70 hours weekly? Why you've divorced twice? Why Tyler barely communicates with you despite residing in your home?" "You little," Michael began, stepping toward David. "That's sufficient," I interjected, positioning between my sons. "James gave us choices, not commands. We each decide independently." "Including you, Mother?" Jennifer questioned, her legal perception focusing on my evasion. "Have you decided?" All gazes turned to me. My offspring, Maggie, even Greg, who had remained a respectful observer to our kin drama. "I've spent 30 years fleeing this place," I remarked slowly, finding my way to truth with each word, refusing to utter Benjamin's name, keeping his chamber like an exhibit, recoiling when James mentioned Montana. I inhaled deeply, and none of it brought recovery. None of it honored our child's life or made sense of his passing. I motioned toward the pane where farm inhabitants went about their morning routines. "But this society has preserved lives, given optimism, created kin for those without one, all in Benjamin's name." "So you're staying," Michael concluded flatly. "I'm considering it," I corrected. "I want to read all James's missives first, understand everything he built here, then decide." "And if we don't want to participate in this grand vision," Michael pressed, "then that's your choice," I replied simply. James protected the farm legally regardless of our involvement. This place will continue with or without Mitchell kin participation. The tension in the chamber was broken by Thomas appearing in the entry. "David, The new equine is feeding. You said you'd help groom her. David smiled, tucking his still unopened packet into his garment. Coming, Thomas. He paused at the exit. For what it's worth, I'm staying. At least for a period. The rest of you can do whatever with Dad's suggestions, but I found something here I've been questing my whole adult existence. After he departed, Michael shook his head in frustration. This is exactly what I feared. Dad's created some dream world here that's drawing us in one by one. Or perhaps, Jennifer suggested cautiously, he created something authentic in a world that often feels dreamlike. You too. Michael looked betrayed. What happened to your associate track? The high court ambitions. Jennifer shrugged. A gesture so unlike my always certain daughter that it momentarily stunned me. I don't know, Michael. But I do know I haven't been content despite achieving everything I thought I desired. Maybe Dad perceived that when I couldn't. This is madness, Michael. We're supposed to have professions and existences in Denver, not rush off to act as benevolence workers on a farm in isolation. Your dad commuted for 30 years, Maggie observed quietly. Created influence in both realms. Perhaps such equilibrium is possible for all of you. Michael stormed out, Greg following after an apologetic glance toward Jennifer. My daughter remained, studying her father's suggestion with fresh eyes. He knew me better than I thought, she admitted softly. How did he see what I've only recently begun to acknowledge to myself? Your dad had a gift for perceiving beneath exteriors, I replied, even while keeping his own depths concealed. Outside, I could see David with Thomas by the barns, Michael positioned by his vehicle with device pressed to ear, and the daily life of Mitchell Farm continuing around them. Lives James had preserved, futures he had changed, all flowing from the devastating loss that had nearly destroyed our kin. And for the first time in 30 years, I allowed myself to wonder if Benjamin's passing, while never making sense, might yet have significance through this unexpected inheritance. A week transpired at Mitchell Farm, the longest I'd remained in Montana since Benjamin's passing. Each day brought fresh disclosures as I immersed myself in James's hidden realm. I perused his missives in order, a dozen each evening, observing through his terms as the society developed from one displaced former soldier to the flourishing haven it had become. I toured every facility with Maggie. The learning building where young ones who'd struggled in traditional education prospered under personalized focus. The craft area where former soldiers fashioned furnishings that generated revenue for the farm. The health station staffed by volunteer physicians from Billings. And the healing riding hub where injured young ones bonded with rescued equines. The floating program by the pond became my daily practice. Settling on the tribute seat, observing trainers teach liquid safety with careful precision. 47 young ones had mastered floating here. 47 lives potentially preserved from Benjamin's destiny. My own offspring responded differently to James's inheritance suggestions. Michael returned to Denver after 2 days, citing urgent enterprise matters, but vowing to consider options. His parting terms, "Don't make any permanent choices yet, Mother," carried both worry and caution. Jennifer took a 2-week absence from her legal firm, devoting hours with Robert Winters, reviewing the farm's valid challenges, migration cases, former soldiers' benefits appeals, custody matters for females escaping mistreatment. She worked with quiet intensity, posing occasional questions, but keeping her thoughts private. David never departed. He moved into a compact lodge near the barns, devoting his days to the equines and his evenings in extended conversations with Thomas and the former soldiers. I'd never witnessed my youngest offspring so focused, so purposeful. The unease that had defined him seemed to dissipate in the Montana atmosphere. On my 7th morning, I awoke early and walked alone to Benjamin's tribute. The ascending sun cast extended shadows across the pond that had taken my child and reshaped my spouse. Decades of sorrow and concealments had flowed from this spot. Yet somehow optimism had emerged as well. "I thought I might locate you here," came a tone behind me. Rose neared slowly with her staff, Thomas following with a collection of field blooms. "Tuesday blooms for Ben," Thomas clarified, carefully arranging them at the tribute. Rose eased onto the seat beside me. "James came here every morning, too." said it helped him begin the day with meaning, recalling why all this exists. I observed Thomas whispering to the tribute, having some private exchange with the lad he'd never met, but somehow knew through James's tales. He kept Benjamin vital here, I remarked softly, while I was keeping him deceased in Denver. Different methods of mourning, Rose amended. Neither correct nor incorrect, but James's method aided others. Created this. I gestured toward the farm visible through the foliage. My method aided no one, not even me. Yet here you are now, Rose observed. That's what counts. Thomas finished his bloom arrangement and wandered toward the pond's border, granting us privacy while staying in view. I've been perusing James's missives, I informed her. One particularly affected me from about 5 years past. He described observing you and Thomas at the Independence celebration. Thomas was assisting younger young ones with illuminations, so cautious, so protective. James wrote that it reminded him of Benjamin with his younger kin. Rose smiled. James often remarked Thomas and Benjamin would have been kindred spirits, both so mild, so attuned to others' emotions. In that missive, James wondered if I would ever meet Thomas, if I would perceive what he perceived, Benjamin's essence enduring in this society. I inhaled deeply. He wrote that his greatest remorse was building all this without me. It was, Rose confirmed. He informed me once that triumph felt empty without you to share it, that rescuing outsiders couldn't compensate for the gap widening between him and his own kin. Yet, he never disclosed to us. Fear is potent, Rose remarked simply. Once he'd set the pattern of concealment, breaking it became more terrifying with each passing year. We sat in agreeable quiet, observing Thomas toss pebbles across the pond surface, no dread of the liquid that had claimed Benjamin, just respectful caution instilled by James's floating program. I have made my choice, I remarked finally. Rose nodded unsurprised. I thought today might be the day. How did you know? You have James's expression, the one he got when his mind was resolved. She patted my palm. Whatever you've chosen, he would honor it. I'm staying, I stated, the terms bringing immediate lightness. Not visiting, not observing, staying, making this spot my residence. Rose's gaze filled with moisture. James would be so thankful.